Do you believe, just for the record, that the federal government, any part of the federal government, is knowingly concealing evidence about UAPs from the public?
100%.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely.
And where?
I know the exact locations.
Hello, everybody. My name is Doofus Ricky, and I have not posted on this channel since I first started, 2-3 years ago? But I had to come back for this. Oh, you haven't heard? There are aliens in the ocean. So this was kind of the meme, right? Aliens in the ocean. But in reality, the conversation about UFOs and the government having possession of crafts and reverse engineering has been talked about for years. But now there are government officials, people who have worked at NASA, Area 51, the Pentagon, that are credentialed and decorated and have no history of diverting from their normal duties, that are providing testimony about UAPs at congressional hearings. And while there have been some very interesting conversations in the past, like Bob Lazar on Joe Rogan, this wasn't a podcast. It wasn't a documentary. It wasn't on ancient aliens. This is a committee oversight hearing, multiple of them actually. And because of that, while it's more compelling, it can be a little boring, confusing, repetitive. They can't answer a lot of the questions, and sometimes when they do, it's very vague. So I wanted to compile the interesting points, the compelling points of the hearings, so that people don't have to listen to 4 to 5 hours of testimony to get to the interesting or compelling parts. And I'm going to try to keep it pretty brief because it's still a lot of information. That's the point, for it to not be very drawn out, but bear with me here. I haven't done this in a while. I'm going to go over who our key players are here, show footage of the incidents they're talking about, and try to make sense of some of the lingo so it's a bit more palatable for laymen such as myself. But you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and share this with your non-believer friends. Let's get right into it. We're going to talk about last year's hearing first. In July of 2023, there was a shocking congressional hearing on the topic of UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. There were 3 witnesses in this hearing, led by Pentagon whistleblower David Grusch. Now, I want you to understand these aren't just random dudes eating up conspiracy theories in their basement. These are decorated veterans testifying under oath at these hearings. So I'm going to somewhat paraphrase, but mainly just read straight from the transcript how the witnesses introduce themselves. David Grusch was an intelligence officer for 14 years at the U.S. Air Force at the rank of major, and most recently at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency from 2021 to 2023. He was the co-lead in UAP and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force. And eventually, once it was established, AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. These are official government agencies. Our other witnesses are Ryan Graves, who is a former F-18 pilot in the U.S. Navy with a decade of service, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve, and David Fravor. He was a retired commander in the United States Navy, and in 2004 was the commander of the Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. And he specifically says 2004 because that's when the incident that he encountered occurred. In this hearing, 2 of these gentlemen are first-hand witnesses to UAP events. That's David Fravor and Ryan Graves. David Grusch, however, became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 filing, which is a report filed under whistleblower protection. He filed this with the U.S. Inspector General after multiple reports were coming in from current and former military and intelligence individuals stating that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy regarding UAPs. Grusch says these individuals have long-standing track records of legitimacy and service to this country, and he has taken every step he can to corroborate the evidence over a period of 4 years while he was with the UAP task force.
In 2019, the UAP task force director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general. and in effect becoming a whistleblower.
Okay, so he says right there in no uncertain terms that while he was with the UAP task force, he was informed that there are multi-decade crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs within our government, and upon trying to access further information on that, he was denied. Even though, as he says, due to his extensive executive level support duties, he was cleared to all relevant compartments, and yet he was denied this information. Upon questioning, Mr. Grusch was asked what he thinks was being hidden, and here's his response.
What kind of information do you think was hidden, and do you think it should remain hidden?
Yes, I can speak to that very briefly in an unclassified manner. As you know, the preponderance of my complaint was classified to the intelligence communities. Both material acquisition and exploitation activity, also baselining the UAPs, but not sharing it with, intelligence professionals that are actually doing step briefs to pilots. That kind of information. Material
acquisition and exploitation and baselining UAPs but not sharing it with intelligence professionals. He also states blatantly that the U.S. government is in possession of UAP crafts.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Later, he's asked this question again, but this time it's also including bodies.
You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
And I find this one so interesting because when he's asked if he's seen bodies, he says no. But when they asked him if he has seen crafts, he says he can't answer that in a public setting. So that's kind of a non-answer answer, isn't it? Okay, next we're going to move on to the witnesses that have firsthand experience with UAPs and look at what they said here. Mr. Graves opens by stating that he has experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and more than 30 aircrew and veterans have confided similar encounters with him. Concerning what he has seen himself, here's what he said.
In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers, and I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs.
A dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere that split between 2 F-18s midair? Excuse the French out of me. What? And even though they submitted a safety report of the incident, it was never acknowledged and there was just nowhere else they could go with it. He's later asked how he knows that these are not our aircrafts, and here's what he said.
How do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's 0 airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
And just to be clear, the sound barrier is Mach 1. Graves goes on to say that because of this, he founded the Americans for Safe Aerospace, an organization where witnesses can go to report UAPs, and he reveals a few of the reports that they received, including pilots reporting UAPs above them at about 40,000 feet, making inexplainable maneuvers like right-hand turns and J-hooks, and recurrent sightings happening north of Hawaii and in the North Atlantic. He then says other veterans are coming to us reporting UAPs in our airspace and our oceans. He's asked by Congresswoman Luna about an incident that happened in 2003 at Vandenberg Air Force Base regarding a 100-yard-long red square. And he retells the information given to him by one of the reporters from the Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
She also asks him about an incident that we do have footage of. Now, here she says what did she say? The gimbal video go fast incident, which are two separate incidences. So I don't know which one she's talking about, but they were both taken off the Florida coast in 2015. So it's a little bit confusing, but I'll show you both videos either way. This one is going to be the go fast.
Echo 61 Tango, Roger, over.
Oh, got it! Woohoo!
Roger, there's troubleshooting.
Did you box moving target?
602.
No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at it fly!
And we always say these videos are so unclear. Maybe it's a bird, maybe it's this or that, but you can hear the pilots. I would think they know what a bird looks like from inside their jet. But I digress. Here is the gimbal video, which I think this is the one he's talking about.
Dude, that is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS, though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating.
That one looks like a classic flying saucer, like a UFO you would see in the cartoons. So Miss Luna asks him what happens after the video cuts off. And in his answer, he doesn't really say what happens after the video ends, but he does just kind of say how they could further analyze the footage to get more information. And he also says that there was a fleet of objects. It wasn't just one. One of Mr. Graves' key points in coming forward is that military and commercial pilots are given no direction on how to handle a situation like this, and it can pose safety issues.
If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue.
Our next witness, Commander Fravor, leads with his account of the Tic Tac incident, the one that he encountered. Now, this video is often confused with the gimbal. I think if you search it online, the Tic Tac incident, and comes up with the gimbal video, but that's not the video. The video is called the FLIR, Forward-Looking Infrared.
On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller had told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All four of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down and saw a white Tic Tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water. like a ping pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the Tic Tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the Tic Tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the Tic Tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the Tic Tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingman, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the white water was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cap point roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken. And after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends.
And yes, all of these videos are very blurry and grainy. They're not taken with any equipment that's meant to document and study UAPs, just the recording devices that are equipped on the planes. Upon later questioning, Fravor answers to what the UAP looked like and how it maneuvered.
It was perfectly white, smooth, no windows, although when we did take the original FLIR video that is out there, when you put it on a big screen, it actually had two little objects that came out of the bottom of it.
Can you describe how the aircraft maneuvered?
Abruptly, very determinate. It knew exactly what it was doing. It was aware of our presence, and it had acceleration rates. I mean, it went from 0 to matching our speed in no time at all.
Now, if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do these maneuvers that you saw, would it be capable of doing that?
No, not even close.
And just to confirm, this object had no wings, correct?
No wings.
And he also expands more on the white water and radar jamming situation that he had mentioned in the previous clip.
Do you believe that you witnessed an additional object under the water in relation to your encounter?
I will say we did not see an object. There was something there to cause the white water, and when we turned around, it was gone, so there was something there that obviously moved.
Okay, it was not the same object, though, that you were looking at, correct?
No, we actually joked that the Tic Tac was communicating with something.
Did you experience any of that jamming or interrupting your radar or weapons system?
My crew that launched after we landed experienced significant jamming to the APG-73 radar.
Later in the hearing, Mr. Grothman asked specifically what kind of reporting took place after the incident, and Commander Fravor says he was in the top 20 in the battle group, and the captain and admiral were aware. No one came, no one talked to us, nothing was done. Commander Fravor also has this to say about UAPs and our national security.
The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Mr. Grothman asked the witnesses why the government wouldn't make public information that's 15 to 20 years old. And the witnesses all seem to agree, speculating that the DoD would say that it might display national security vulnerabilities. And in the 2024 hearing, he asked the new witnesses this question, and they come to the same conclusion. But that's not to say that the witnesses don't take national security seriously. A lot of them believe that there is classified information that wouldn't even pose any threats to national security if it were revealed. The director of AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, Dr. Kirkpatrick, states that there is no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity or of other world technology brought to the attention of this office. And just to be clear, as of today, he is the former director of AARO. He stepped down in December of 2023. There was just a Senate hearing with the new director, Dr. Kozlowski. But besides the point, Mr. Grusch responds to Dr. Kirkpatrick's statement.
It's not accurate. I believe Dr. Kirkpatrick mentioned he had about 30 individuals that have come to AARO thus far. A few of those individuals have also come to AARO that I also interviewed, and I know what they provided Dr. Kirkpatrick and their team.
Okay.
I was able to evaluate that information.
I need to go on.
And you can hear there he's being cut off, but that's because each person only has 5 minutes to question all of the witnesses. So they're kind of trying to move it along. And the people coming forward about these things are not always without retaliation. Mr. Graves and Mr. Fravor both said that they haven't had any issues with this. Mr. Grusch, however, discusses briefly the repercussions he and others have faced.
Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything?
I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank.
Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities. There were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked, and it actually makes me very upset as a leader to see that happen to other coworkers and actually superiors of mine over the last 3 years.
Mr. Burleson asked Mr. Grusch about the attacks, and he seems like he's trying to be very, very careful in his response, but it's pretty interesting nonetheless.
Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured.
By UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed, myself and my wife, was very disturbing.
Now, Mr. Gates, who we won't get into that right now. He is not on the subcommittee and he's not a witness. He's just a guest in this hearing. But he mentions the Eglin Air Force Base incident and eventually speaking with the pilot who took the photo of the UAP.
Several months ago, my office received a protected disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I sought a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all of the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America, and we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. When we spoke with the flight crew, and when he showed us the photo that he'd taken, I asked why the video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico. And when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace. Not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb. Again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down, he said that his FLIR system malfunctioned, and that he had to manually take this image.
AARO has come out and said that that's very likely a commercial lighting balloon, and I would agree they look very similar, but from the report they were at about 16,000 to 18,000 feet. I don't know if commercial lighting balloons go up that high. I would assume somebody at AARO confirmed that they could. Otherwise, that speculation would be debunked pretty immediately. Either way, I would wonder why it was in their testing area and why his systems went down when he approached it. Unless, of course, you're assuming the pilot is lying. But again, it does look very similar. I'll give you that. It looks like it. And because I touched on AARO's explanation for that one, I will also say they have the gimbal, go fast, and FLIR videos on their website. And they just describe those as UAPs that have not been resolved. But anyway, we're going to move on to the next hearing, the recent one that happened on November 13th, 2024. There are another 4 witnesses in this hearing, 2 veterans, 1 NASA official, and 1 journalist. We have retired Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, I'm not sure exactly how you say that. He's retired from the U.S. Navy and now Chief Executive Officer at Ocean STL Consulting with his doctorate in oceanography. He has a history of working for the U.S. Department of Commerce as, and I'm going to have to read this because it's a lot, the Acting Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere and Acting Administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. God, that's a title. Lue Elizondo is a former Department of Defense official with experience in counterterrorism, counterintelligence, counterespionage, counterinsurgency. He was part of a program called AAWSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program, which later became ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And he has been very active and open about what he knows. He was also on Joe Rogan. He wrote a book. He was on the History Channel, and I'm sure many, many other things. Michael Shellenberger is the founder of the newsletter Public and the author of a journalistic piece about special access programs, including Immaculate Constellation, which is something that they mentioned several times in this hearing. And he gave a copy of the Immaculate Constellation document to everyone at the hearing. And that is now available for everybody to read online. Michael Gold is a former NASA official and member of the NASA UAP Independent Study Team. He worked as an executive at Bigelow Aerospace and is currently the Chief Growth Officer at Redwire, an aerospace manufacturer, and serves as treasurer for the Commercial Space Flight Federation. Again, another group of people with quite impressive credentials. Dr. Gallaudet opens his testimony by retelling events from a 2015 U.S. naval exercise off the East Coast, where he received an email on the Navy's secure network from the operations officer stating that there is an urgent safety flight issue due to multiple near collisions by unidentified objects. And what he's talking about here is the Go Fast video.
The email is addressed to all the subordinate commanders, and the subject line read in all capital letters, "Urgent safety of flight issue." The text of the email was brief but alarming, with words to the effect, "If any of you know what these are, tell me ASAP. We are having multiple near mid-air collisions, and if we do not resolve this soon, we are going to have to shut down the exercise." Attached to the email is what is now known as the Go Fast video, captured on the forward-looking infrared sensor of one of the Navy F-A-18 aircraft participating in the exercise. The now declassified video showed an unidentified object exhibiting flight and structural characteristics unlike anything in our arsenal. The very next day, that email disappeared from my account and those of the other recipients without explanation.
Again, military pilots witnessing UAPs and given no direction on how to handle these situations. And moreover, the email that was sent out was deleted from all accounts and no one addressed it. Dr. Gallaudet goes on to say that he learned from former DoD official Chris Mellon that satellite UAP footage from years ago has not been shared with Congress. When questioned on this footage, he just says that he can't really talk about it, just that it was in 2017 and it was a disc-shaped object. The witnesses are asked if any of them were aware of the Langley Air Force Base incident before it came out in a Wall Street Journal article. The Langley Air Force Base incident is where multiple drones were flying over Langley Air Force Base in restricted zones in December of 2023. And the DoD press secretary did come out to confirm the validity of the report. And she said that the commanding officer did have the authority to shoot them down if they posed a threat. And while she didn't say why he didn't shoot them down, she just said that they didn't appear to be hostile, which I don't know. If they're recording, they're not going to appear to be hostile, I would assume. But what do I know? I don't know nothing. Anyway, Dr. Gallaudet is the only one who said that he was aware of it, and this is what he had to say.
How did you become aware of it?
A colleague of mine who I referenced previously, Chris Mellon, he wrote an extensive article about this, that there were other incursions of drones over Langley before this, as well as many, many military installations over the last 5 decades. And later in the hearing, he's asked about the Omaha incident.
Can you tell us more about that incident? You've written a lot about that.
What the watchstanders on the bridge observed was a UAP, again, something that was aloft but had no observable exhaust or control surfaces, so it was something that couldn't be explained, and then they saw it enter the water from the atmosphere and going through the air-sea interface, and so thus exhibiting transmedium travel.
This leads to questioning about USOs, unidentified submersible objects, and he just says he has no personal experience with it, only what he has been told.
One instance that was revealed to me was in the 80s on a nuclear-powered submarine, a ballistic missile submarine, that the object exhibited the characteristics of a Russian torpedo in terms of its speed of movement and closing rate with the submarine, and then it slowed and followed the submarine slowly in its wake for a period of minutes, and then rapidly exited the scene. And nothing that we know of and technology-wise could replicate that.
And the speed of these objects was faster than anything that we have or anybody else has that would be manned. Is that correct?
It was on the order
Underwater.
of a torpedo. So
yes, sir.
He also discusses the actions he believes should be taken and the need for transparency regarding UAP from the government. This would include mandating the director of AARO to provide briefings on what the government knows and does not know, which did happen shortly following this hearing, but we'll get into that a little bit later. The second witness, Mr. Lue Elizondo, has what I would say is a pretty extreme view of UAPs. He outwardly believes them to be some kind of intelligence. And just to be very transparent, I know he did at one point show a picture of a UFO. I think it was at one of his book events or something, and that had already been debunked before he showed it, but he did later come out and say, you know, sorry, that's my bad.
Let me be clear. UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe. Furthermore, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries. I believe we are in the midst of a multi-decade secretive arms race, one funded by misallocated taxpayer dollars and hidden from our elected representatives and oversight bodies. I believe that America's greatness depends on three elements: A, a watchful Congress; B, a responsive executive branch; and C, an informed public. Over the last decade and a half, I learned that certain UAP programs were and are operating without any of these elements. Although much of my government work on the UAP subject still remains classified, excessive secrecy has led to grave misdeeds against loyal civil servants, military personnel, and the public, all to hide the fact that we are not alone in the cosmos.
What do you think is happening here? This isn't just some nut job that mistrusts the government. This is a former DoD official and member of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program saying that aliens are real and the government knows it. What is happening? He also goes into reprisals people, including himself, have faced for speaking out, and the nature of the body in charge of receiving UAP information within the government.
A cadre within our own government involved in the UAP topic has created a culture of suppression and intimidation that I've personally been victim to, along with many of my former colleagues. This includes unwarranted criminal investigations, harassment, and efforts to destroy one's credibility. Most Americans would be shocked to learn that the Pentagon's very own Public Affairs Office openly employs a professional psychological operations officer as the singular point of contact for any UAP-related inquiries from citizens and the media. This is unacceptable.
He says we'd be shocked by this, but that didn't mean anything to me. I had to look it up before I was shocked by it. And that is because I didn't know what a professional psychological operations officer, apparently the person in charge of information on UAPs, was. So on goarmy.com/careers, the description for this job is: as a psychological operations officer, you'll be a master of persuasion and influence and an expert in political trends, cultural trends, and attitudes of people in your given area of operation. You'll utilize your understanding of social psychology and individual and group dynamics to influence individuals, groups, and populations. Why would this be the point of contact for people who have witnessed UAPs or want to share information about sightings and events? And he is actually asked this in the hearing.
You also mentioned in your opening statement that the Pentagon's Public Affairs Office employs the psychological operations officer as the singular point of contact for UAP-related inquiries. Why the heck would they do that?
Sure, that's a great question. I would ask the Pentagon. There's a long history here of that individual providing misleading and false information to the public through various news outlets and media outlets in order to discredit this topic. I've personally been victim to it. We have the documentation to substantiate where this information has been absolutely inaccurate, that has been provided time and time again, and it turns out that that individual was also working with former leadership of AARO at the time as well.
Mr. Elizondo was questioned on UAP crash retrieval programs, which he says he can't discuss because he signed DoD documents. But when asked if the government has UAP crash retrieval programs, he says yes.
Has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
Yes.
You specifically said the document said you can't talk about crash retrieval. Well, you know, you can't talk about Fight Club if there's no Fight Club.
He's also asked about employees becoming injured from UAPs. Now, whether these injuries are from retrieval or reverse engineering or from UAP encounters themselves is unclear.
Okay. In your book, you mentioned government employees who've been injured by UAPs, placed on leave, and receiving government compensation for their injuries. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How can the government deny we have recovered craft if they're paying people because they've been injured by recovered craft?
Ma'am, that's a great question. That's why I think we're here again, because I've seen the documentation by the U.S. government for several of these individuals who have sustained injuries as a result of a UAP incident.
Regarding whether he thinks these crafts are intelligently controlled, here is his response.
Would you agree that it's likely that they are being piloted by some mind-body connection?
Ma'am, I think it is safe to presume here that they are being intelligently controlled because some cases seem to anticipate our maneuvers, and in other cases they seem to I came across an email where the word stalked was used in a very secure email between Navy officers discussing their ships being pursued by a UAP. The human body can withstand about 9 G-forces for a short period of time before you suffer negative biological consequences, blackouts and ultimately redouts and even death. Comparison, our best technology, the F-16, which is one of this older platform, but one of our most highly maneuverable aircraft, manned aircraft, made by General Dynamics, can perform about 17 or 18 G-forces before you start having structural failure, meaning that the airframe begins to disintegrate while you're flying. The vehicles we're talking about are performing in excess of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 Gs.
The human body can withstand about 9 G-forces. Our most maneuverable aircraft can perform about 17 to 18 Gs. And he says these UAP are performing 1, 2, 3,000 Gs. That's bonkers. Mr. LaTurner gets straight to the point. Do we have bodies?
Was anything described as that we have possession of bodies?
Yes.
We have is it multiple types of creatures or?
Sir, I couldn't answer that. I can tell you anecdotally that it was discussed quite a bit when I was at the Pentagon. The problem is the supposed collection of these biological samples occurred before my time, in fact, before I was even born.
Mr. Shellenberger uses his testimony to discuss what Immaculate Constellation is, the information contained in the Immaculate Constellation document, overclassification, and disinformation. In this clip, he mentions a USAP, which is an unacknowledged special access program, and the claim is that Immaculate Constellation is a parent USAP, which would mean it has, sub-USAPs within it, with the mission of documenting UAPs. And just to be clear, Immaculate Constellation is the unacknowledged special access program. The Immaculate Constellation document is the document written up about the USAP, the Immaculate Constellation, and that's the document that was given out to everybody. And that was not written by Mr. Shellenberger, that was written by somebody else and given to him by an anonymous current or former government official, although Mr. Shellenberger states he knows this person and he knows the people from which the information was obtained.
We now have existing and former U.S. government officials who have told Congress that AARO and the Pentagon have broken the law by not revealing a significant body of information about UAPs, including military intelligence databases that have evidence of their existence as physical craft. One of those individuals is a current or former U.S. government official acting as a UAP whistleblower. This person has written a report. This is the report that says the executive branch has been managing UAP, NHI issues without congressional knowledge, oversight, or authorization for some time, quite possibly decades. Furthermore, these individuals have revealed the name of an active and highly secretive DoD unacknowledged special access program, or USAP. The new UAP whistleblower claims that the U.S. military and IC database includes videos and images taken using infrared, forward-looking infrared, full-motion video, and still photography. Immaculate Constellation includes high-quality imagery intelligence and measurement and signature intelligence of UAPs, the whistleblower's report adds, including spheres, orbs, disks, saucers, ovals, triangles, boomerang, arrowhead, and irregular organic.
And here is where he describes some of these specific UAP reports contained in the document.
One involved orbs surrounding and forcing an F-22 out of its patrol area. In another incident, the crew of a Navy aircraft carrier watched a small orange-red sphere rapidly descend from a high altitude of 100 to 200 yards directly above the flight deck of the CVN, or aircraft carrier. Another source came forward who told me that they saw a roughly 13-minute-long, high-definition, full-color video of a white orb UAP coming out of the ocean approximately 20 miles off the coast of Kuwait. Then halfway through the video, the person said the orb is joined by another orb that briefly comes into the frame from the left before rapidly moving again out of the frame. The person discovered the video on SIPR, the Secure Internet Protocol Router Network, which the DoD uses to transmit classified information. The U.S. military military and intelligence community are sitting on a huge amount of visual and other information, and it's not those fuzzy photos and videos that we've been given. There's very clear
High res.
high resolution.
How many visuals, graphics, videos, photos?
I mean, I've been told hundreds, maybe thousands.
He also states that the government has been restricting more information since the 3 videos were leaked, the Go Fast, the Gimbal, and the FLIR, and that AARO has been labeling documents with a B7 exemption, which is an exemption from the Freedom of Information Act. According to Mr. Shellenberger's testimony, the government will deny something one day only to later admit it, including the existence of UAP videos and photos.
He added that the Naval Air Systems Command in March 2022 stated they found no additional UAP videos. Then in September 2022, the Navy admitted that the UAP-related videos and photographs existed, but denied the request in full for their release, saying that the requested videos contain sensitive information that are classified and exempt from disclosure.
Also, later in the hearing, Mr. Biggs reads straight from the document some of the other UAP reports in it.
On USG networks, there exists infrared footage of and imagery of a grouping of vessels engaged in SIGINT and mass collection at night in a specific area of the Pacific Ocean. This footage, which was in close proximity to the vessels, a large equilateral triangle UAP suddenly appears directly over the ships. These three bright points are seen at each bottom corner of the UAP, which is observed to slowly rotate on its horizontal axis. And he goes on to describe that. And I just want to read one more. While performing a routine airspace surveillance and control mission in the Eastern Air Defense Sector, an F-22 fighter observed multiple UAP contacts at mission altitude. Moving to intercept, the F-22 pilot noted multiple metallic orbs slightly smaller than a sedan hovering in place. Upon vectoring towards the UAPs, a smaller formation of the metallic orbs accelerated at rapid speed towards the F-22, which was unable to establish radar locks on the presumed hostile UAPs. The F-22 broke trajectory and attempted to evade, but was intercepted and boxed in by approximately 3 to 6 UAPs. And then I'll leave that there.
When questioning Mr. Shellenberger, Ms. Boebert really hones in on the ocean sightings.
Are there any accounts of UAPs emerging from or submerging into our water which could indicate a base or presence beneath the ocean's surface?
I don't know about a base, but as I mentioned, I had a different source entirely describe this pretty extraordinary footage that exists of orbs, of an orb coming out of the ocean and being met by another orb.
This footage is allegedly in the US DoD's database. I tried to search the internet for something that looked like that, and I couldn't find the footage. The only footage I could find showed an orb going into the ocean, which was from Jeremy Corbell, who I believe made a UAP documentary. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's actually sitting in the audience right behind the witnesses here. Our final witness, Mr. Michael Gold, as a former NASA employee, uses this opportunity to, give a Vulcan salute, but also to express the ways in which NASA can come forward to reduce the stigma behind the topic of UAPs, to help research it themselves, and to come up with a more secure reporting system for pilots and for civilians.
Specifically, NASA could, with relatively little cost and effort, host symposia on UAP, or even just participate in existing panels examining the topic, would make a powerful statement to the scientific community that UAP should be taken seriously and researched accordingly. NASA has vast archives, much of which may contain important UAP data. NASA could create an AI or ML algorithm that could search the agency's archives for anomalous phenomena. During my work on the UAP independent study team, it quickly became evident that there is no clear or well-publicized process for civilian pilots to report UAP sightings. The independent study team recommended the use of NASA's Aviation Safety Reporting System, or ASRS. ASRS is the perfect tool to collect UAP data, which could then be collated by NASA and shared with the public at large.
I didn't include too much of Mr. Gold's testimony, only because it's mostly about the need to reduce stigma and start researching UAPs and how NASA and other government bodies can go about doing that, but not too much evidence aside from just saying that NASA has vast archives of information that they can start looking into. He does say it's not like he thinks that they're all unknown objects, but just that they haven't been looked at.
When NASA studies black holes, when NASA studies galaxies, we have instruments that are tailored to do so. With UAP, we're using cockpit gun cameras or cell phones. We could never do good science with that. And let me tell you, the NASA budget is under pressure. We need to make sure that the Artemis program is funded fully. We need to beat China to the moon and maintain our presence in low Earth orbit.
I'm sorry, what the f did he just say? We need to beat China to the moon? Oh, okay. Beat China back to the moon. I got it.
But I think tailored instruments that would look at UAP, In the same way that we have tailored instruments to look at astronomical data is important to gathering valuable and uniform information.
But what I generally gather from these two hearings is that there are a ton of UAP sightings and clear footage, usually over sensitive military installations, that have not been revealed, and that the DoD actively tries to discredit witnesses and come up with conclusions for UAPs that the witnesses don't find reasonable. When asked directly what the witnesses believe the UAPs to be, some do not let stigma force them to shy away from what they truly think.
What do you believe UAPs could be or are?
Strong evidence that they are non-human, higher intelligence.
I echo my colleague's comment, sir.
Genuinely do not know.
Don't know, but we must find out.
How would you define non-human biologics, non-human intelligence? What are we actually talking about?
I don't think it's a stretch when you look at the diversity of life on this planet and the size of this universe to think that there would be more diverse, higher order, non-human intelligences throughout the universe. And that's probably what's visiting us.
I would take the scientific approach. The definition would be the ability to react to a stimulus in a manner that requires an intellectual thought process.
I just don't know.
I think we must be modest in our assumptions that we're looking for intelligence. That could be biological, it might not.
Non-biological. But what non-biological intelligence, what does that mean, though?
Artificial intelligence, ML, machines. We assume that all intelligence would be like us. And every time we look out in the universe, we are humbled relative to what we don't know.
This is really the point of these hearings, though. We don't actually know what's going on up there, or in our oceans for that matter. So if there is something unknown going on, do we just ignore it and hope everything stays civil? Or do we really start investigating this? Or is the government already doing that and we don't know?
And I'll say this, it is clear from my experience and what I've seen that there is something out there. The question is it ours? Is it someone else's? Or is it otherworldly?
So this is where the video was going to end. But then a week later, after the hearing, there was another hearing with the director of AARO. Luckily, this one's not as long, but I have to include that in this because between both hearings, it seems like people are just not very trusting of AARO and they're hesitant to come to AARO with reports. Dr. Gallaudet even speaks of a meeting he had with AARO, which he describes as an hours-long influence operation on him, where they tried to convince him of the historical records report, which is the report that AARO uses to update all of the UAP information, and he says is error-ridden, and also to get him to question the validity of incidences and witnesses. But he does state on AARO's behalf that they have new leadership now, and they did reach out to him to meet again, and he takes this as a good faith effort. AARO is the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office of the Department of Defense, and the director of AARO is Dr. Jack Kozlowski, who is the gentleman sitting in this hearing. Dr. Kozlowski begins his opening statement by addressing changes that AARO has made since he arrived in his position.
AARO has taken meaningful steps to improve data collection and retention, bolster sensor development, effectively triage UAP reports, and reduce the stigma of reporting UAP events. Last year, AARO worked with the DoD's Joint Staff to issue guidance to defense personnel worldwide on how to report UAP observations and is working with the military services regarding implementation.
He goes on to say that AARO launched a website in August of 2023 where UAP footage and reports can be viewed, as well as case resolutions, material analysis, and archival records. There is also a section on the website where current and former government employees can go to report UAPs. To clarify a little, here are some screenshots from the website. Under UAP cases, for example, there's South Asian object, which AARO states the object is likely a commercial aircraft, and then it has video footage of the incident. And then similarly, there are others like the Navy 2021 flyby, the Middle East object, the FLIR, gimbal, and go fast videos that we watched, which again, you can watch a video right there on their websites. And these again are described as just anomalous phenomenon. They don't know. And as far as material analysis, there is a section on the website, UAP records, that displays a detailed report of a specimen outlined as alleged to be a component recovered from a crashed extraterrestrial vehicle in 1947 and purportedly exhibits extraordinary properties such as functioning as a terahertz waveguide to generate anti-gravity capabilities. And there are two links to reports on this specimen that's well above my pay grade. I tried to read through it, but I couldn't tell you what the conclusion of the reports are. But it seems like they just don't know what it is, but it is definitely possible for this material to be terrestrial, so from Earth. Dr. Kozlowski says he's putting an emphasis on strong partnerships, transparency, and scaling up the work of the office.
Our ability to collaborate with key partners, including the scientific community and the public, relies on information sharing, to include downgrading and declassifying UAP-related information. In some cases, it may be unclear to the public why the DoD classified a piece of information in the first place. Why are photos of seemingly benign objects such as balloons classified? It's often the case that an object or phenomenon isn't itself a security concern, but the location, source, or method used to capture it is still sensitive.
While Dr. Kozlowski does say that to date, AARO has not found evidence of extraterrestrial life and that of 1,600 reports, most are birds, balloons, and drones, some are anomalous and do require attention. He also discusses the need for AARO to work with other government agencies to collect more data. He also pulls up a chart which represents UAP trends since 1996 and explains the information on it.
We're seeing a great increase in satellites recently, particularly with the launch of mega satellite constellations such as Starlink, where the satellites are catching what is called satellite flares or glint off the sun just after sunset or just before sunrise. And on the rightmost, we'll see the morphology or the shapes that have been reported. The majority have been lights or orbs. And at the bottom, we'll see the geographic bias that I mentioned before, where most of the reports historically had been near the government sites.
Following that, he goes over an incident that was recorded over Puerto Rico's Rafael Hernandez Airport.
And this video was taken with infrared, and what appears to be the transmedium part where it goes into the water is actually where the temperature of the water is equal to the temperature of the object, and the camera can no longer distinguish between the two. It's not that the object actually goes into the water. And so we assessed that the object, likely a pair of balloons or sky lanterns, was floating at about 7 knots over the airport and descending to about 200 meters.
Maybe somebody could explain this to me. How could a lantern balloon, how could that be changing temperature in that way, going hot and cold? Because he's saying that the infrared is not picking it up sometimes, not because it's going under the water, but because it's changing temperature. But how could a lantern balloon be doing that? I don't know. I'm just not understanding that, I guess. He also goes over and kind of explains away the Go Fast video, but this is listed on AARO's website as unidentified. And when he's explaining it, he's not explaining what it is. He's just saying that it might be going faster than what it looks like.
The Go Fast was captured the public attention and congressional attention when it was made public in 2017. Looks like an object flying very fast over the water, very close to the water. Through a very careful geospatial intelligence analysis using trigonometry, we assess with high confidence that the object is not actually close to the water, but is rather closer to 13,000 feet.
And again, with the Mount Etna UAP, explains how it's not going through the volcanic plume as it seems, but he's not explaining what it is.
Through very detailed 3D modeling and pixel by pixel analysis of the object as it's traversing across the clouds, they assessed that the object was actually 170 meters away from the plume and not flying through it. And to be clear, AARO does not believe every object is a bird, a balloon, or a UAV. We do have some very anomalous objects. It's just the nature of resolution. We can only resolve things that we understand.
So yeah, he says there that not everything is explainable, and he does go over a few incidences that are totally anomalous at this point.
The first one was brought to us by a law enforcement officer out west, where he observed a large orange orb. And as he was pulling up to the location where he thought would be below the orb, he saw a blacker than black object. He said it was about the size of a Prius, 4 to 6 feet wide. And as he got 40 to 60 meters away from the object, it tilted up about 45 degrees, and then it shot up vertically. He says 10 to 100 times faster than any drone he's ever seen before. And it did that without making a sound as far as he could tell from inside of his vehicle. And just as it left his field of view through his windshield, then it emitted very bright red and blue lights that illuminated the inside of his vehicle as brightly as if someone had set off fireworks just outside his vehicle or street flares. And when he came back to investigate that area, he found no disturbance of the ground beneath it. So that's one interesting one. Another one comes to us from Southeast U.S. There was a U.S. facility where 2 cars of government contractors were leaving the facility around 9 o'clock in the morning. They looked up in the sky and saw a large metallic cylinder about the size of a commercial airplane, and it was stationary. They observed that there was a very bright white light behind or around the object. They saw it stationary for 15 to 20 seconds, and then it disappeared. Obviously, an object that large, stationary unless it's a blimp, is unusual, but then disappearing, we can't explain how that would happen. And then the last case was interesting. We had a aircraft that was flying parallel to another aircraft, and it was capturing imagery of it, and a small-looking object appeared to fly between the two of them much faster than them. Through very careful analysis, we think that the object might have actually been further away than the object that it was videotaping, but it requires very careful analysis to come to those conclusions, and we don't have the metadata to support that.
Overall, it does seem like he wants to comply with what the public and government employees are asking for and with laws regarding transparency by implementing new procedures within AARO to procure more information, to scour intergovernmental databases, and to be more transparent with the information obtained. My takeaway from all this is that while it seems some very legitimate people believe there to be aliens that have been visiting Earth, even though the government has possession of crafts and bodies, they at least have not shown us any proof of that. But there is proof that there are crafts or unknown objects flying around mainly sensitive military areas that the government doesn't know what they are. So in a nutshell, that is the more important information from the 3 hearings. Are aliens real? I think you would have to be crazy to think that of all of infinite space, we are the only intelligent beings. I feel like that would be astonishing. But are they here? Are they watching us? Does the government have little green bodies in a lab somewhere? I don't know. That is going to do it for today. My first video back on YouTube. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you have a very, very happy holiday coming up.
Spheres, discs, triangles, ovals, electronic device malfunctions, feelings of unease of being watched, of shared awareness, physical sensations of warmth or cold, unexplained smells, and psychological distress. What are UAPs? Where are they coming from? Are they otherworldly? Are they government secrets? Or just a balloon? And will we ever really know?